Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I'm talking to James Cribbs, KN4NEH. And I'm really excited about this conversation. After I got back into ham radio a couple years ago, I was very interested in seeing where the innovation was happening in the hobby. And when I found Ham Radio Prep, it was obvious to me that whoever founded this company that was running it was very aware of staying on the cutting edge. And then recently, I saw something called the World Radio League, and I guess I shouldn't have been surprised to find out that James Cribbs had something to do with that too. I think it's fair to say that James is a ham radio entrepreneur, and we're really excited again to have him here today. James, thanks for joining me.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me, and thank you for the very nice intro. I would also say I'm really excited to be on this podcast because many time listener here as well, and you've had some just really incredible conversations on the podcast about some things that are near and dear to my heart. So it's very exciting for me to be joining you here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that you've been watching. So let's start with your ham radio background. That's always where I like to begin. When did you get licensed, James, and why?
I got licensed either 2017 or 2018. I think my original interest in ham radio goes a little bit back further than that. I studied electrical engineering at Vanderbilt. We had a CubeSat club, which is basically, amateur radio based communications for satellites. My electronics professor was a big ham. I didn't get licensed at this time. I'm studying at this point, 2010 to 2014, basically. I was living in Atlanta post graduation when a friend at my apartment complex he wasn't an electrical engineer by any means. He was really into kind of like prepping, I guess you could say. And he was like, "Hey, man, we need to get our ham radio licenses, check this thing out." Gets me into it. I started looking at some of the information about it, and I'm like, "Man, so you're telling me that this is like my first year of electronics, like in college, basically, right?" And so that was kind of where the genesis of like ham radio came from. I started working on ham radio prep as I was studying for my own license and just pulling from my own experiences of basically freshman electronics. And if you go back long enough in ham radio prep, and if you took the course in like 2018 or 2019, you would have actually heard me teaching the course and talking to a PowerPoint. We've come a long way since then. We've brought on like instructor Jim in 4BFR, who does a much better job teaching, and he's been actually an Elmer to me throughout my like growing in amateur radio. But it's been great because building ham radio prep has been a big learning experience for me in the ham radio space, and I've kind of feel like in a way I've been taking other folks who are new to ham radio along the same journey that I've been going on, which is getting your license, making your first contacts, picking your first HF radio, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I obviously want to dive into hamradioprep.com, but before we do, I think I need more explanation as to why a young person like yourself decided to become a ham radio operator. And I say that given the perspective that I hear from a lot of people that aren't hams. Why in today's day and age of iPhones and the internet would I possibly want to get on the air? So what was the reason for you?
For me, it's an overlap of a lot of interests. So for me, I would consider myself a person that um, independent communication is very important too. Not that I'm like necessarily distrustful of communication networks and things like that, but I do like to have control over my own communications. And if I want to make a contact with someone, if I want to have a conversation, that's I guess maybe a philosophical sort of connection that I have to ham radio. I've also been always kind of a tinkerer. Like when I was in college, I one time took a relay out of a strobe light. I bought a strobe light online and I took a relay out of it, and I was trying to put that relay into my light switch in my dorm room to make a Bluetooth controlled like light switch, and ended up electrocuting myself like 3 times because I was trying to take the component out of the strobe light and left it plugged on once or twice. I think there's also kind of that type of connection to me with amateur radio, which is just the I don't know, the tinkerer aspect of it. I think that what's happening in technology with amateur radio, and then you see things like LoRa where people are doing like encrypted communicate. I think the whole space is absolutely fascinating. But more recently, chasing DX and just the international aspect of amateur radio and how it brings people together is really a big part of my passion. My wife is from Venezuela. We have friends from all different places of the world. We even have like family and cousins living in Spain. And I think that amateur radio has this sort of unifying force when people are joined together and enjoying their hobby worldwide.
James, I love the answer because it wasn't simple. It was multi-pronged, which I think is actually the answer for a lot of people, that there are a lot of different things that come into play when they say, this is why I'm in the hobby, or this is why I've continued for a couple of decades. So I'm going to take you back to college. So you're studying for your ham radio license. Apparently you must have seen some sort of vacuum within that area for you to want to start ham radio prep. What was that exactly?
To say it, I guess, bluntly, is like the first website that I was directed to, I just would not use it. The first website that someone sent me to and said, study with this, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I went to the interface, I clicked through it, and I just said, like, no, like, I'm not going to, this is not how I like to study. This is not what I'm going to do. And if I, like, you're talking about V equals IR, you're talking about the power law, like, I basically know kind of the fundamentals of this stuff. I think I could put something better together, yeah. And so I started working on it from there. The version 1 of Ham Radio Prep in probably 2018 was still pretty rough around the edges as I got it out, but it, like what I was just trying, the vision that I had, which I think is much more fully realized now, was just a really easy to use interface and a really complete sort of studying experience that you can take with you anywhere.
So just clarifying that a bit, was it the content that you were trying to address or the actual look and feel of the interface, or both?
I would say both. Yeah, both. Like for me, I think the first thing that drew me to maybe say there's got to be something better, the number one thing I would say was the interface, the user experience side of things, which as I've been doing ham radio prep and now World Radio League for a time, I found out that that's something that I'm really passionate and really picky about, is just the way that user interfaces are laid out and making things really clear and easy for the user. That was the impetus, was definitely the user interface. But as I got more into ham radio prep, I realized that what we needed to do to be successful was balance these two competing factors, which is number one, teaching the underlying theories and principles so that someone gets a really good education as they're going through the program on the one side. And on the opposite side of the spectrum is having high course completion rates, which means a very high percentage of people that start the class in the class. And so you can imagine that if the pendulum swings too far towards theory, we study the analytics on this as, video completion rates and things like that, the course completion rates start to go down. And so where I think we've really found our success is really right in the middle, where you're getting a good fundamental understanding of the theories and the principles, but we're breaking up our lessons into 5 to 8 minute lessons. You're not being overwhelmed. You've got multiple ways to learn between a video and a text and a quiz. That's what's been enabled us to keep the course completion rates and ultimately get a lot of people into ham radio that otherwise just wouldn't do it, or they would be overwhelmed if they didn't have a system like this.
Well, before we get too far into this, I've got to say that when I took my 4-decade break, I was first licensed in 1978. It took me a while to get back into the hobby again, but I was shocked at the user interfaces that existed. I mean, I was looking at websites that I was kind of embarrassed for the hobby that I was looking at it. And there were a lot of them. It felt like it was old FoxPro databases or, almost systems running on DOS. And that surprised me in a hobby where quality matters a lot when you're on the air. Audio quality matters a lot, making sure your equipment operates properly. And then these interfaces weren't quite up to snuff. So kudos to you. I'm so glad there are people like you out there that are trying to keep us up with 2024. So you've created this online study guide to get your license. How many ham radio operators prefer that, say, versus an in-class session or a book? I mean, have you done any surveys about that?
I don't have any really good data to give you on that. I do know that for ham radio clubs, a lot of times they will use our system for quizzes, practice tests, or even show the instructional videos, a live session, and then you do Q&A and things like that. So I think that the technology coming into the classroom is also really good. I also work with a number of teachers, especially like in STEM courses in schools, and especially with the mobile app, they just say, I just basically gave the kids your mobile app, got them downloaded, and then a week later they're ready to take their exam. They've learned a ton of things, and so I don't necessarily see those as competing forces. I think that digitally enabled in-person instruction is going to become more important in the future.
How have you seen the business evolve since you first started it back in 2018, right? That was your first.
I would say like the main thing that we focus on is a something that we call 1% better. And so what we do is we read every single bit of feedback that people say. We take a look at the analytics and see what questions people are struggling with most. Some people say, I want the course to be longer. Some people say, I want the course to be shorter. Some people say, I want you to cover this topic in more depth. And we aggregate all of that data. Sometimes we even use, a lot of the AI tools have helped us enable better data analysis faster on what people are asking for, and then we just try to get a little bit better every single day. We say what's the top priority. Sometimes that's the content itself that needs to be improved. Sometimes it's the technology. So we recently had a release on our mobile app where after you've studied and seen all the questions, we have an algorithm that finds what are the most difficult questions for you and then helps you prioritize those questions. And so what I've seen change in our business may seem from the outside of, like, I guess maybe bigger jumps, or it may seem like these things kind of pop up, but really it's just sort of like a day-to-day grind of figuring out like what's the thing that we need to improve that day and just getting a little bit better. The industry perception of ham radio prep has changed a lot. Like when we first started doing like marketing for ham radio prep, because ultimately our goal was to reach people that were not hams. I think initially there was a little bit of a backlash. I saw a lot of people were not happy about us doing marketing campaigns, videos, and stuff like that. But I think that over time, generally people have kind of come around and they've said, yeah, if you want to reach people that are not amateur radio operators but are adjacently interested, you have to market. Overall, I see a lot of excitement in amateur radio about what's happening. There's people are more, something has happened with the conversation. I think you've been a big part of that, Kevin, over like especially like the last year or two. COVID, all of a sudden people are home. They're more interested than ever in tinkering, finally getting their ticket. And now people are starting to really look out and say like, okay, how can we innovate and improve? I think that we're really in an interesting place in amateur radio where people are maybe starving for some more innovation. They want to see some great things. And a lot of the conversations on your podcast are around that same theme, I believe, where like um, trying to say, what else can we do? How can we make this better?
Well, I definitely think there's tools available to us in 2024 that if we just use them, we can get the word out better and interface better with people and keep them excited and energized. If we keep relying upon tools from even 20 years ago, then I think that's not going to keep people as engaged as possible. James, I'm curious. You said you have a degree in electrical engineering.
Yeah, it's actually a double major between electrical engineering and biomedical because, I'm just one of those people that can't make up their mind, I guess. I'm always trying to find the next thing to learn, and so I ended up just doing both.
So, do you have a background in business also? Because it seems as though you have a very good handle on how to build a business and market it and get the word out.
No, that's all just been hands-on learning, but I have absolutely loved it. It's an outlet, I guess I would say, for constant improvement because there's no right answers in business. There's never, there's no one says this is the predictable path that you have to take. You just wake up and you say, what are the things that make the most sense to do today? And So I've truly enjoyed that outlet.
My wife is in medicine, and there tends to be a black and white answer for everything. It's a right or wrong way to move forward. And I'm always in conflict because in my business experience, there are 20 different paths you could take. And you just need to be able to choose the path that's going to work for you and your team. So I absolutely understand what you're talking about. James, can you tell me how many people have actually gone through the program and what that growth has looked like over time?
I would say since 2018, we've had at least 70,000 people complete the program at this point. It's probably more than that at this point. That's, since we started. As far as I know, Ham Radio Prep is currently the most popular online class and also the most popular mobile app for studying for your amateur radio licenses in the world today.
Well, it's an impressive number. And again, in this world where we're constantly talking about how do we get more people involved with the hobby, you're actually doing something about it. So again, thank you for the work that you do there. I should know the answer to this, but are you providing any international assistance with licensing?
Our first foray into international is with the World Radio League, where we've had a lot of folks joining internationally. And that's one of the things I'm super, super excited and super, super proud of. I still, even though we've now got over 10,000 users within the World Radio League, I'm still excited when I go in there and just see new members from a new country logging contacts. I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. I've seen like China in there this morning, a lot of European countries, but within Ham Radio Prep specifically, the license courses are just US based. We do offer continuing education on things like HF and emergency communications, which are generally universally applicable, although they are only in English.
So let's dive into the World Radio League. Give us the background about World Radio League, why you decided to start this product, and what it actually is.
After doing ham radio prep for 5 or 6 years, we had released all of the license courses, we had released some continuing education, and we just had a sort of big question of what's next. I'm definitely have sort of the stir crazy bug within myself where I wasn't going to do nothing, and I felt like amateur radio was still extremely passionate about it. I just felt like I was seeing a big gap between people getting their license and people getting involved. So we had a huge number of students who'd taken the ham radio prep program. And I feel like the solutions that there were out there for them to go out, log that first contact, start tracking your progress, were not really what those students were looking for. Like they kept coming back to us with more questions. They kept saying, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to install this software and this software and this software, but it's not really what I'm looking to do. And so I started dreaming up, like, well, what would that look like if we were to do something? And that was where World Radio League came from. And so it's really, I think ultimately what World Radio League is we've started basically building a bridge, because you've got on this side of the spectrum, you've got somebody who's just getting their ham radio license, and you've got on the far end of the spectrum many of your guests on this podcast who are very experienced contesters. And there's really not today a really good pathway from this point to this point. And so World Radio League is meant to be that bridge, to take somebody from, okay, you've got your license, you're getting further education. Let's go ahead and help you make your first contact. Let's help you get set up on HF. Let's help you start tracking your progress. Let's participate in a QSO party. And so we've been building the product with that bridge in mind, where today, what World Radio League, if you were to go in and log in, what you would find is it's really, really good for your first web-based logger as well as a mobile app-based logger. And it's really good for POTA, which POTA is one of those bridge sort of activities that somebody might do between getting their license and maybe becoming more involved in the contesting. Most people don't go straight to spending $15,000 on the tower, right? And so it's a really, really good POTA logger. But our vision for what we want to do is much bigger than that. If you log into World Radio League and you see where the contest is happening, we have a bigger vision of doing something really great with live contesting and live leaderboards and analytics and commentary and live streams. And that's the direction that we want to build. And so the name World Radio League is kind of a promise, I guess, to what we want to build. Although I would say today, if you're just getting into ham radio and you want a really easy way to log your contacts, get into POTA, you will love it. You can export your contacts, you can import contacts into it. If you're a really, really experienced contester, I would still encourage you to log in and check it out, but it's not going to replace N1MM or DXlog for you today because we have not built a lot of the more advanced features into the logger, but you still will probably have some fun with it. You can import your contacts, you can, click around and play with it.
So I'm fascinated by this online scoreboard, live contesting, live stream aspect. Tell me more about how that either functions now or will function.
Yeah, so in what I could call version one of our live scoreboarding today is there's events. So you can see what events are coming up. Let's call it Field Day, Ohio QSO Party. Essentially, we're adding, I guess, today events that would be more easy, more like participation style events, and that's by design. And so we take all of our members at Ham Radio Prep and we say, hey guys, you want to get involved in participate in your first event? Come and hop in. Then you can see all the people that are participating, and it gives you a scoreboard and a map of other people that are participating in real time. What we need to do to really build that out further is we don't, like today, for instance, track multipliers. We don't really adjudicate logs, or we're not really refereeing these contests too much because they're sort of low stakes. But it's all about, again, I guess the sort of philosophy of 1% better is, no product is ever 100% finished on day one. So we didn't want to wait until it was perfect to get it in the hands of users. We wanted to release a version that works, and so we can get some data and feedback while we continue to work on the more advanced features.
And outside of the events, is it possible for somebody like myself in Maine with a friend in, say, Ohio, can I set up a system where I can monitor how he's doing over the weekend if we wanted to have a unique competition ourselves?
I love that. I love that idea of so this is a topic which you've talked about on your podcast. I guess I can go ahead and raise it, but I think is really interesting as well is how much should be a platform that facilitates traditional contesting versus how much should be creating new types of contests, allowing users to create their own contest, much more like maybe almost an esports experience where maybe you're creating a lobby and getting in and having a contest with some friends. And I think ultimately that we'll probably land somewhere in the middle. We can't do today the what you're talking about. It is something that we are looking at, but I guess I don't want to, it's a very, this is one of the reasons I actually love your podcast is listening to the debates around the similar topics such as this. On the one hand, there's a lot of folks who say, oh, we've got to change everything, the whole contest system. Let's, and then, and then on the other hand, these rules exist for a reason. Like a lot of the things that maintain the integrity of the contest are important because if your contest isn't fair, then people aren't going to want to participate and it's going to kill the fun of the game as well. On the one hand, you have the folks who are maybe trying to say, let's scrap the whole thing. And on the other hand, you have the folks who are, I think, rightfully pointing out that a lot of these rules and regulations have been developed and iterated on over time in order to maintain the integrity of the game and in the integrity of the ham radio competitions. And if a game is not fair, it's not fun to play, right? Now, there's no perfect game. I think it was one of the founders of Atari who said that the ideal game should be easy to play but difficult to master, right? And so I think that the World Radio League in a way is it should be really easy to come in and log your first contact or celebrate saying like I still remember my first DX and my first like contact with Europe, and it's like you kind of are just mystified at that point that you're talking to someone all the way around the world, and you're like, oh my god, like this is crazy. And especially on like I was doing it on a half wave dipole that I built myself with speaker cable. And I'm just like, this is crazy. But then at the same time, then there's levels. And so you have to consider both those things. But I'm really excited about it. And I'll also say, you know, we're trying to do something special at World Radio League, but I by no means think that we're the only innovator, and I don't think we're the only ones saying this. And so I think that an amateur radio is a very small space that can't really be divided in itself. So I hope that amateur radio operators out there continue to support multiple projects, continue to support multiple efforts, and they. But the important thing is that you're supporting them and that you're getting involved, you're sending your feedback, you're doing those types of things because ultimately you just need people to be excited and engaged to continue to build these things, right? We take a look at the numbers, we say, and we're doing really good with the initial, part of World Radio League, but you have to the business acumen comes in where no matter how you're structured, you have to find a way to sustain yourself so that you can continue to innovate over the next decade and that you don't end up with yet another product that just goes on the shelf and ultimately doesn't get innovated in. And I think that's maybe not so much of a talked about aspect of the entire thing, but you really do need people that are organizationally savvy. It's not just the technology, it's wrapping this technology into an organizational structure. And you can look out and you can see various examples of organizations, even in the amateur radio industry, that have suffered from those types of things and then ultimately crash and burn because they maybe can't get out of their own way. And so it's the technology, but it's also how are you structuring it? How are you paying for it? How are you enabling yourself to continue to innovate?
All of this is absolutely correct, and is music to my ears to hear all this. I will say that I appreciate your modesty, that there are probably others that are innovating, but there are very few, James. So I still want to give you credit for that. I don't hear this conversation a lot. I oftentimes hear ideas about where ham radio should go, but actually, as you know, implementing and executing those ideas is an entirely different thing. And I'm really impressed that you're doing that.
I really appreciate that. I mean, um, I appreciate that more than you know, because that's one of the things that I definitely pride myself on. I think that especially like getting kids involved in amateur radio, for instance, yesterday I just had a conversation with the teacher in New York who's introducing ham radio to his class as a part of a STEM education that also includes robotics and drones and all of these other cool things. And we gifted him a bunch of online license classes and said, get your kids signed in, get them in on the mobile app. Let's introduce them to amateur radio. And I try to do as much of that as we possibly can. And like I say, fitting it into a business model that allows us to sustain ourselves, which is very difficult in this industry.
Well, I think the other mistake that I often see beyond the executing and implementing, people want to have a complete product done on day one. And what I heard you say was, we're going to build into this. We're going to start with these building blocks, and eventually we'll get to this other thing. And I think that's really smart. You have to start from where you are, and you have to make sure it's properly funded, and that you have a core group of people. And may take a year or two or three to get to where your full vision is. But I see so many people that are stopped dead in their tracks because they believe it has to be thorough on day one, and that's just not going to happen. It's not common sense.
Absolutely. I have this conversation regularly with folks outside of amateur radio too. My brother's a developer, and my brother's working on his own development project, and he got caught in this trap. And every time I talk to him, I say, what can you remove? Like, how can you get this in the hands of users as fast as possible? And I think that goes for when you're releasing a new product. It also goes for when you're releasing new features inside of a product. If you feel like you're absolutely have considered every single case and it's 100% ready, you probably waited too long. That does change a bit as the product has become more mature. Now that we're a year in, our testing process is a bit more robust. Shout out to all the World Radio League beta testers. We recently had a beta tester program launch, and a lot of folks have signed up and they're helping us test, and we're keeping them filled in on. We've got them into a dev environment where they can see the new stuff that's coming out and get their feedback, and we've got some really great folks. Also, shout out to Andy in Zero APX, who helps with a lot of managing that testing group as well as product ideas. And Alfredo, WP3C, he's a big contester based out of Puerto Rico who has been helping with a lot of product feedback. He's always pushing me. He has so many features that he wants, and I'm always trying to, take his brain and let's put these things and sequence them out because he has a lot of things that he's been asking for inside of the product. But to your point as well, we have World Radio League is completely free. If you want to come in, you want to log your contacts, and you want to use the app, it's completely free. The only feature gate that you'll run into is with the import of large numbers of contacts. The reason is because cloud costs are one of our main costs. So by doing that, we kind of defend ourselves against like our cloud costs surpassing our revenue, which would be catastrophic and could cause bad things to happen. If you're just losing money, it becomes problematic, right? So that allows us to scale with the cloud costs that we incur. But the other thing is like it's also a program for people who are early to say, hey, I support you guys. You get a founding member number with the club, and then as we continue to grow, you kind of have that badge of honor of like, hey, I saw World Radio League on Kevin's podcast when they were only a year old, and I signed up and I've been sticking with them and watching all this development and innovation. And it's our like kind of nice way of saying, thank you for being an earlier supporter and believing in the promise of what we want to do before we could even do all of it.
James, I appreciate your passion. Do you have any time to get on the radio yourself now?
Yeah, I do actually. I did a public service event. We have this thing in Georgia here, the Peachtree Road Race, which is really big. That's fun. We got together with some amateur radio operators, and I was at a water stop and was able to play radio a little bit. I do a little bit of POTA, and the guy Fred in South Georgia, who I was just recently going down and helping him install some new. I'll find you, Fred, and I'll tag you before so that we can you can watch this podcast as well. I'm sure he's probably a listener, but got to go down and help set up a tower in South Georgia and check out another station. So I do. Yeah, I'd say like my day to day, I am full time on this, which is new as of a year and a half ago. So I was able to make the jump, and I would say, 50% of my time generally is spent like actually working, coding, designing. 50% of my time is spending organizing, having conversations, doing stuff like this. And then I'm able to have a little bit of fun. I had a friend visit Georgia recently, and I was able to take him on his first POTA activation. And he is a electrical engineer friend like myself, and he was fascinated. Like, it's just one of those things that like a lot of people still just don't know that much about. And so it's cool to see kind of like those magic moments when, especially when you map your contacts or something, you take a look at your log and you say, this is who we just made a contact with, and they're like, multiple people will ask me, did that go over the internet or something like that, or like how did I'm like, no, this box, this wire, we just talked to this guy in Maine, and he's like, no way, you know. Um, but no, I'm very bullish on the future of amateur radio.
Well, James, I feel like I need to let you get back to work and start, continue to build out World Radio League. So thank you for your time today. I'd suggest to all of our listeners, check out hamradioprep.com. If you haven't already, you probably have. And definitely check out worldradioleague.com. James, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
I'm W1DED, Kevin Thomas in Maine. I've been talking to KN4NEH, James Cribbs, Ham Radio Prep, and World Radio League. Thank you.